When you're fed up with fighting food and your body, join us here. I'm Ali Shapiro, creator of the Truce with Food program and your host for Insatiable, where we explore the hidden aspects of fighting our food, our weight, and our bodies, and dive deep into nutrition science and true whole health. Fair warning, this is not your parents' health care. This is a big rebel yell to those who crave meaning, hunger for truth, and whose lust for life is truly insatiable. Believe me, freedom awaits. Welcome to Season 8 of Insatiable. This season's theme is consistency. It's no secret that consistency is the key to success. Many of us have so much health knowledge and are aware of the latest and greatest food research and have the best of intentions, and then real life happens. Here we fall off track, lose motivation, and get discouraged. Conventional wisdom tells us consistency is about willpower, discipline, and hard work. But research in adult development theory points elsewhere. 15 years ago, I had discovered functional medicine and reversed my irritable bowel syndrome, depression, and a host of issues. I was amazed at the power of food as medicine and felt amazing. But even with all these results, I couldn't stop my binging and overeating. My quest to discover why can't I stick with this led me to grad school to study adult development and how we change ingrained patterns and behaviors. I came to realize inconsistency is a symptom, just like depression and binging. It's not the problem, but has various root causes depending on the individual. Not only is falling off track an invitation into deeper healing and more radical results, I found that when it comes to consistency, a lot of the common beliefs we have around being consistent are what actually causes us to fall off track. In this insatiable season, we'll look at inconsistency as a symptom, not a problem. We'll explore what happens after the novelty of some new plan has worn off and why real life trips us up. What are the various root causes of why we lose motivation, want to be bad with our food, and tell ourselves, chuck it, F it. In today's Season 8, Episode 3, which is all about commitment and consistency, we have Diane SanFilippo. Consistency requires evolving based on the seasons, real-life interruptions, or emerging dreams we had for ourselves. In today's episode, two-time New York Times bestselling author, Diane will share with us how evolving is her key to showing up consistently to achieving her health and life goals. And I've known about Diane's work for probably a decade now, when she was back in New Jersey and I was back in Philly. I mean, it was back in my paleo days, and I bought her book, Practical Paleo. I loved how she made something like healthy fats so less overwhelming with her visual teaching approach. And the main reason I wanted to have Diane on today is because she embodies to me the piece of consistency that is rarely talked about, the consistent need to evolve in what our bodies need and the choices we make. Thinking we are going to eat and exercise the same way, regardless of real life or how our bodies change, is a recipe for failure. Or even that we will always want to do the same things that make life meaningful is going against the laws of nature. Nature isn't about survival of the fittest, and that's its own podcast of how Darwin's work was misinterpreted. It's really about who can adapt. And this includes cooperating with our bodies as they change through injuries, as we get healthier, and as we talked about in last season, our emotional and soul hungers. So today I want to talk to Diane not only about how she's adapted over the years, both her ideas about nutrition and taking on the life choices that create a life we want to be healthy for. Because as we talk about on Insatiable a lot, health is just the vehicle, right, to really creating a life that we want. And that's just as important as providing motivation to be healthy is having a meaningful life. Before we get to Diane, I just want to give you a little bit more about her incredible career. She is the owner and founder of Balance Bites, a certified nutrition consultant and two-time New York Times bestselling author of Practical Paleo and the 21-Day Sugar Detox series, and co-author of Mediterranean Paleo Cooking. Her most recent book is Keto Quick Start, which released January 1st, 2019. Diane holds a BS from Syracuse University and is certified in holistic nutrition, holistic lifestyle coaching, and Poliquin biosignature modulation. I hope I pronounced that right, Diane. She is the co-creator of the Balance Bites Masterclass, the co-host of the top-rated health podcast, the Balance Bites podcast, and co-host of the brand new entrepreneurial podcast, Driven. We have a lot of entrepreneurs here, so they're going to love listening to that. She is also the creator of Balance Bites, Spice and Meals, and she lives in San Francisco with her husband, Scott, and 2 fur kids. So thanks for being here, Diane.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I want to start at the beginning of your wellness career, which actually starts before you got into wellness. And you were doing graphic design and marketing before you went back to become a certified nutritionist. And what was happening internally that made you honor your evolving interests?
My interest really came from 2 different places that melded together. So on one side was my interest just in health in general. So way backing up, this is a lot of years ago, backing up to post-college, I had gained a bunch of weight in college. I had always been an athlete before that, but wasn't through college. And I'm sure many people can relate to that. You just don't have your sports teams or whatever it is. And so after college, I needed to find a way to get healthier. And so I started on this path of, at the time, I guess, dieting or, trying to figure out what worked for me, and did lose weight, essentially eating like a low-fat approach, conventional wisdom of healthy. And I became interested in health from that time. So, it's not all for nothing that I was kind of following misguided recommendations. There was a period of time where I was working at Trader Joe's, again, many years ago, when I was always kind of like back in school or doing a job and having a side hustle. So I was in school for graphic design at the time and working at Trader Joe's. And I found it really rewarding to walk around the store and help moms, mostly at the time, find gluten-free options for their kids. Now, this was back in maybe like 2000, 2001, 2002, somewhere around there. When this stuff, you have to remember, this stuff was not common knowledge at all. So there was a grocery list in Trader Joe's, and it was like, what is gluten-free? What does it even mean? And there were lots of moms who were looking for this for kids with autism at the time. It was pretty new information that eating differently could help. So that being said, I knew I was interested in and passionate about helping people with these specific dietary concerns. I just found that to be very, very rewarding. And then fast forward a bit, several years later, I became interested in performance nutrition, what kind of, macronutrient breakdowns would fuel people as athletes, just kind of casual athletes, not professional level, but, folks who were training for triathlons and things like that. So I was interested in that. And then the intersection really comes with, and I think I laugh when I think about it, but this is the truth of what happened. I was watching Dr. Oz. He was on the Oprah show at the time. It was probably one of the last years Oprah was on the air with her, Oprah Winfrey show. And, before Dr. Oz had his own show, and he was talking about blueberries and antioxidants and how, eating an antioxidant-rich diet could help prevent cancer. I think that a lot of folks in the wellness space can remember the first times that they just, had these light bulb moments of, oh my gosh, this is something I've been really curious about. And now the door has been open. So you have to remember, this was kind of before I was going back to school for nutrition so many years ago. And I had a family history on one side of cancer. My dad's side of the family, there's cancer all over. Some of it was slightly self-induced from smoking. A couple of my family members, back, my grandma, whatever, were smokers, but some was not. And I later came to find out that the other half of my family suffered from a lot of autoimmunity. So along my health journey, figuring out that, oh my goodness, something that we eat can not only prevent cancer potentially, right? This was just oh my gosh, like there's something I can do besides just not smoking. Because until that point in time, I did not think of anything in my, nutrition and lifestyle as being anti-cancer for whatever reason. I don't know if we just weren't thinking about it. So it was a huge light bulb moment for me. And it honestly made me feel very empowered. It was like, okay, I don't smoke. I can change what I'm eating. I can get more of these compounds into my diet. And so that really pushed me onto the path of how can I learn as much as I want to know about nutrition and health? What can I do with it? And I actually went into learning from Paul Chek, the Chek Institute. That's where I did the holistic lifestyle coaching certification first, which was kind of lightweight foray into the nutrition stuff. And the Bowman College certification was much more intensive. It was a couple of years and it really was a ton of education. But that's something where, initially I was working with food. So back in 2008, I had a meal business called Balanced Bites because I was balancing meals for people based on kind of what their macronutrient needs were and all of that. And I really actually started this whole journey with a food business. So it's come full circle, and I'm sure we'll talk about that with Balanced Bites meals now that people can order anywhere in the country. But at the time, I was cooking locally here in San Francisco and delivering to, folks around the city, delivering to a gym. I had a cooler in a gym, and I was doing that work for people. And not too long after starting that business, I decided to close it because I was burning out. And as some people may or may not know, the food business is a tough one to really earn a living in. And, I have a much better approach now than I did then, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I just kind of went for it because I couldn't not. And I'm glad that I did, because I needed to go through that process of doing the work for people for many months and also kind of burning myself out in the process, which I don't recommend burning yourself out, but ultimately it does lead you to better decision making. And it's like, how can you know that that's not for you if you don't experience it? So I really came to a point where I knew in my heart that I didn't want to do the work for people. I really wanted to teach them how to do it for themselves. And so the next decade thereafter, as you've alluded to with my books and programs, I have spent the last decade of my life teaching people how to help themselves. And so it has come full circle that now I do have meals that I offer because I feel like I've spent a decade teaching people how to do it for themselves. And so people know how to do it, but that doesn't mean we all want to do it 100% of the time. So it is a really interesting thing, but that's kind of the beginning of, and what sparked everything. And eventually when I did close Balanced Bites, the first iteration where it was just a local business, I went back to school at that time to study nutrition so that I could teach people how to do this for themselves. And that was a really important turning point in my life where I did decide, I'm going to go back to school and do this. And later went on to teach seminars, and the whole thing kind of spurred from all of that.
Oh my God, I love that. First of all,
that was the quick version.
No, I love it. There's so much I want to be like, First of all, I did Paul Chek's holistic lifestyle training as well. And yeah, it was a really good, kind of launching point into
right.
learning more. And I think so many people, because we have a lot of people who are in the wellness field here, can relate to that concept of nutrition being pretty powerful beyond just what we were told. And I find that I actually had cancer as a teenager. And when I was getting radiation, because we have a ton of cancer in my mom's family and a little bit in my dad's, but my mom made me, we did a bargain. I would drink miso soup every day that when I was getting radiation. And then we tried to eat well with when I was going, what I could eat through chemo and all that stuff. But it was amazing to me in my 20s when I realized most of my health problems had been caused by the chemo and the steroids and stuff. But I had knew kind of that nutrition mattered. Mm-hmm. But the more you follow your curiosity, the more, and you really experiment with yourself, and me reversing all of the issues was just, it was on such a deeper level that it does make you then want to take that next step to your point of okay, now I'm going to go back to school. Now I'm going to continue to dedicate my life to this.
And I've actually come full circle in a sense on that, because while I've been teaching people about nutrition for the last 10 years, I think the smartest thing anybody who's learning about nutrition can come to terms with is there's no one size fits all with nutrition. And the thing I've only ever stood by as a 100%, I feel confidently about this, is that, food that comes from nature is always the best for everyone, not about processed garbage, regardless of whether you're eating grains or not. Getting the stuff that comes as closely to what it would be in nature as possible. I feel like that's the blanket statement that I can deliver, that, feel really confident with that for a lifetime. But from there, I've definitely seen paleo works great for some people. Some people really feel good having their oatmeal. Some people want to eat keto and love the way they feel doing that. Works for them. It's very healing. For others, it's the worst thing they can do. And so, if there is one thing to know, it is that there is not one way to approach it that is always going to be the best for every single person. And even in that, I know you've been talking about consistency. I think people fall into a consistency trap where they think that the thing that worked for them before can or will or should always work for them. And I just don't think that that's true. And so it's so important that we realize that how we eat matters, that we eat real, whole, nutrient-dense foods matters. But ultimately, there's not one way to build our plate that's going to work every day, every week, every month, every year for the rest of our lives. Like, I think we have to know that we have to be adaptable in that sense. And food matters, but lifestyle factors and stress and all of these other things, I think matter just as much, because you could be eating perfect food, but you're under so much stress, or the way that you handle your emotions or don't handle them, or trauma that you've experienced that's unresolved, or just the choices you make every day, the job that you hate. Your perfect food cannot undo the damage that that does to your body. So, and I think that that's something I've come to see more of in the last 10 years across folks who come to me with all different kinds of problems, you know?
Well, and that's something that I so admire about you. I mean, we joke on this podcast, we're a bunch of bad, and the community, my clients, we're a bunch of bad joiners, right? Like, we can't.
Oh, I'm not a joiner.
I know you're a rebel, which is why
I am not a joiner. I'm like, who's doing that? I'm not doing it. And I don't want to lead the joiners either. I inevitably do, but I'm not trying to do that.
Yeah. I joke that we're like a community of bad joiners because we don't like dogma. But I always look at things from the internal experience and what something like ascribing to one diet or something does for people. And even for experts, it gives them a certain level of certainty, right? And I joke, for those of us who don't have religion, we find nutrition. Yeah, because it provides this whole moral structure of, okay,
that's
like if I'm vegan, I'm going to take care of the animals. And if I'm paleo, I'm going to go to CrossFit. That's an oversimplification.
Yes.
But I have just so admired that you even wrote this big post about, like, I guess people in the paleo community were saying, oh, it's getting bigger and now ideas are changing. And you're like, but that's inevitable. And I'm like, oh, she can like hang with uncertainty. And so I'm curious, how do you think not needing that degree of certainty has enabled you to evolve and thrive in other areas of your life? Because to your point, it's not just about what you're eating. It's also like, what's fulfilling me? And I love that on one of your podcast episodes, you noted that you made the connection between, okay, when I have a really good connections in my life, my sugar intake goes down. Mm-hmm. And I think the more we have the capacity for uncertainty, the more we can follow our curiosity, but also make these connections that if we need a certain way of eating and we're not looking at this more nuanced, invisible piece of the puzzle, it can be really challenging.
I think there's a few things going on with folks who want or need that certainty or feel like they want the set of rules. So those who are interested in personality types raises both hands over here. I really find it fascinating not to pigeonhole anyone or put you in a box. It's just more about knowing yourself and identifying the rationale and the reason why you do things, so that if there are not things that you want to continue doing, you find a way to change them, right? I think there's a few things going on, and I love Gretchen Rubin's work and her framework, The Four Tendencies, and she talks about people being obligers who do well with outside expectations, and that the vast majority of the population are obligers and really need outside expectations in order to deliver. And I'm not that person. As you were joking before, I'm a rebel. I don't do well with my own expectations or anyone else's. I identify and deliver better when I'm doing things based on how I identify myself, my sense of self. And so I identify as someone who cares about her health and lives in a way that supports that. So outside of that, it's meaningless to me how anybody wants to label it, because it's just not my business what anyone wants to label things as. You know, to your point about religion and dogma, I'm not a religious person. So I definitely shy away from guru status or trying to make anyone think that I have all the answers to what's right for them. It's more about ideas and approaches and templates and try this, and then you tell me if it works for you. I don't know if it's going to work for you. You know, so that's kind of where I come from on it. And I think it's really hard for a lot of folks who have a ton in their lives that they don't have control over. And this is maybe at the crux of a lot of it, to have one thing that they can control. So this might get a little deep, and some people might be offended by this part, but just hear me out. Like the wedding planning process. Have you ever observed what happens to a woman who works in an office environment when it's her wedding to plan? And it's like, it takes over everything. And I've witnessed that it seems like for once, she's got a lot of control over something. And maybe there's like a mother or a mother-in-law or someone else who's kind of squeaking in the corner about how to spend the money or who knows what. But I've just observed this as, wow, I think this is one time in a woman's life where she has a lot of agency and control. And it feels really good to be like, I get to choose all these things and I'm going to make this the thing I want it to be. When it was time for me to get married, I literally could not have cared less about like 90% of what was happening.
Me too.
I got my husband. I would like to have this barbecue. We will call them the day before because they said the amount of people we had was like unremarkable. They didn't need to plan ahead for the 55 people we were feeding. And, my mom's like, do you like these plates? I'm like, I couldn't care less about the plates. I didn't like them, but she's like, well, I already bought them. I'm like, fine. Like none of this was important to me, but I recognize that in my everyday life, not only am I'm literally all I do all day is make decisions with owning a business, but I feel with most of my life that I have a ton of agency. I have a lot that I'm controlling in my own life. I feel in control of my own life. And it's like a Brian Tracy quote where he says that people are happy or content to the exact level they feel in control of their lives. And so I think that the food thing ends up being a scapegoat for the control that people don't feel they have in their lives. I feel like this becomes one thing, and it's not everyone. I'm not trying to, put everyone who cares about their nutrition or who counts macros or whatever in that bucket, but I think it's important to pull back from it. And this is even me too. There are times in my life where there's so much going on that it does feel like if I pay attention to my food better, that everything can be a little calmer because I have a little more, quote, control over this one thing. And it's not about control in a manipulative, negative way. It's just more this sense of calm that like, I know what's going on here, even if I don't know what's going on in every single part of my life. So I do think that deep down, a lot of folks who lean on this whole nutrition thing are avoiding bigger issues of lack of control of certain things in their lives. Not everyone, but I think that can be a part of it too. So part of it's, wanting rules to follow and that being a comfortable place, maybe not trusting themselves sometimes. And there's just a lot that goes into it. So those are all the things that I think about why people want this certainty of like, here's a thing to follow. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, we talk about it, and it's the work that I do is it provides a sense of safety. What people don't realize is that too much safety becomes dangerous because then when life gets
then you become imprisoned.
Yes. I was chatting with one of my clients, and one of the things that I work on with people is like the stress response that they have. You were talking about Gretchen Rubin's upholders. That would kind of be the equivalent of accommodating, which is a conflict style that people go into. And my work is I can see those patterns with her work, although I don't think they're as static. I think they shift and change, and we can change them when we see why we're doing them and the benefits they provide. But one of the responses is the competitor response when we feel not in choice or out of control or uncertain. And my client was like, I was just thinking about race and class. And I was like, oh, this is why I love my clients. She's like, but it's so much about class and dividing people, like the working class, so that they don't all rise up and say like, why aren't we, making a fair wage? And she's like, and we do that with other women because the only area that it's been accepted to compete in is in our looks.
Yeah. Because
when we go to those corporate areas, I mean, let's be real, Lean In works if you're like only at a certain level of privilege, right? And even then it's tricky. And like they've studied Lean In and the results have been, okay, women tried, they asked, and all they got was more work, less pay, and look like a bitch. I mean, that's kind of the summary of the research.
Yeah.
So I totally agree that food becomes this one place where we want to feel like we have control, but then when we feel out of control in our lives, and that's why I think such a big piece of consistency and being able to evolve is increasing our capacity for uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
And realizing,
yeah.
That's
and I was going to say, I think when you're talking about consistency too, like I want people to know that consistency doesn't equal repetition or sameness.
Great point.
It just means showing up all the time, reevaluating, adapting, and like just continuing to do whatever that work is and continuing to put that effort in day after day. And it doesn't even mean the same level of effort day after day. It just means that you're doing the thing. Like most of us are consistent with brushing our teeth, but there are other things that we will do and we know they're good for us, but we falter with being consistent with them. And I think knowing yourself and knowing these tendencies that we have, whether it's, 4 tendencies, whether it's a personality type or whatever it is, I think that all of that does help us to, it's almost like we each have to hack ourselves. I'm not a big biohacker, but finding out for me, like this is something I found out very recently, that what I have sensed about the way I operate is an actual thing. So what I mean by that is I can't time block. All these people who are like, well, just time block and get this done at this time and this done at this time. And I'm like, that sounds really great. I wish I could do that. I can't, and I cannot explain why, but I cannot operate that way. It just doesn't work for me. And I realized that the way that I can operate is I have to just listen to my body in terms of my energy. And if my energy is flowing in a certain direction, then I do this thing and I get it done. And then I usually rest. And then I do something else that's a different type of energy output or different type of mental capacity focus or whatever it is. So we were just talking before we started recording, like when I'm writing a book, it is the hardest thing that I do because it's so isolating and alone, sitting at the desk and trying to get those words out in a way that makes sense and people will understand. And I do it over and over, but it's the most challenging thing I do because I never know where my energy is going to be. And then there's these deadlines and I have to, so for me, the consistency is that I block out the time and I know I have to just keep showing up and do the best I can each time and it'll come together and trust the process. But it's not going to look the same every day. It's not going to be, I write from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. every day. Like that is wishful thinking for me. I wish it weren't. And for some people, they might be able to do that. And I think that is like, I wish I could do that. So jealous of that, but I think we just have to consistently show up and reevaluate and keep adapting.
It's that time of year again. The live version of my annual group program, Why Am I Eating This Now, opens for registration August 5th and begins August 13th. This program will help you unlock your keys to consistency with your nutrition goals. And with a small group of 15 people, we will get to the root causes of why you fall off track. Together, we'll transform those patterns and behaviors, no willpower required. To learn more, check out episode 6, season 5, where Why Am I Eating This Now participants, Dr. Tina Bugren and Lourdes Brawley discuss how using adult development theory, which is not therapy or coaching, made the program so challenging, life-changing, and different from anything they've done before. A year later, they're still seeing results, impact, and feeling further transformed. Here's what they shared. Dr. Bugren said, Why Am I Eating This Now is about getting to the root of things, not hovering on the surface as too many other programs' plans do. As a result, I stopped slipping with my healthy eating and falling into old thought patterns. I got unstuck and have the tools to keep going. 1 year out of the Why Am I Eating This Now process and using the tools, I've lost 20 pounds and kept them off. Lourdes shared, I joined Why Am I Eating This Now because I wanted to move forward in my own self-development. I was able to discover the deeper conflict around my food battle, including how it protects me and how to move forward. I exceeded my own expectations for my progress, was challenged, and I will continue to make these changes in my life. I have been binge-free for over a year post Why Am I Eating This Now. I truly thought I'd never break free from emotional eating, but I have. And I am much bolder in my life. Yes, win-win. If you're ready to work smarter, not harder, to be consistent and reach your nutrition and wellness goals, join us. Full details are at alishapiro.com. Why Am I Eating This Now live program. And make sure you sign up on my list so that you can get the early bird discount. And if you don't want to wait, you can get started today with the self-study program now. What you pay for this will be credited towards the cost of the live program. So why not get started today and start getting relief and clarity? Yeah, well, and that to me is like really, nature tends to be the framework I like to follow. And it's like, there's cycles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that I also so admire about you is that, speaking of rebel and just showing up, is that, you know, a big piece, and we talked about this, we did an episode on the female empowerment lifestyle brand, but a big piece in wellness, one of the big branding things that people use is they're selling you a sense of ease, right? Like I tell people, when you see that person sipping a sip of tea and they're not selling the tea, what you're noticing,
Right.
the internal, what you're wanting is the internal sense of calm and maybe the house that they're at, or at least the location they're shooting at, right? And so much about the wellness and what gets people to buy is the ease. And then you come over here and you're like, you know what? I just love everyone, follow hashtag Diane Direct. But you're like, I have to be willing to show up and try things. And, you're like, I fail at them, but then I learn from them, and it's hard work. And I just so appreciate that you tell people how, yes, it's great and rewarding. And I would never want to do anything else than entrepreneurship. And it's hard. And
yeah,
I so appreciate that you share that. And I'm curious, have you been the example with writing your books? Because you've shared how you're not a traditional learner in terms of well, I don't know if anyone really is, but we're all forced to read from pages of black and white on, and you are more of a visual learner. So have you always been a hard worker, or have you grown into a person who can show up and do the hard work because you know the results and you've fallen in love with the process, or at least I'm content with the process?
I've always worked hard at things that I found interesting. And I've always been lucky to do well at a lot of other things. Just, I don't know how, for example, I can think of high school and college when I was taking classes where there's a mix of things I didn't want to take and some things I did, right? I always loved my Spanish class because it was elective. Not that I can speak Spanish fluently now, but I loved things like biology. I did not do great in physics, but chemistry and biology I loved. I loved learning about the natural world. I loved art class, loved gym class. I was good with that. Electives, I took a home interior design class, things like that. Always did really well at those. I did not do well in English classes. I didn't do well in history. I was like, why are we learning about the past? Just so I remember what I thought in high school. And in hindsight, what we were learning was just colonial BS history anyway. So I was probably right. I should have just been learning history a different way just to inform, other things. And then, looking at what happened when I got to Syracuse for college, I would say most of what I was taking, I chose. I did have a liberal arts degree, so I had to take in a range of different classes and some things I wasn't interested in, but then mostly, it was things in my major and my minors. And I was taking courses that I thought were interesting. And frankly, I found them to be mostly easy because I was interested. I think things are easy when you're interested, and the time flies, and being curious and wanting to learn and not shying away from something being difficult, but you're interested, so you're willing to learn. I think everyone has that capacity. I don't know that people are willing to honor that the thing they're interested in might be off the beaten path from what others want or expect or think is noble in some way. I'm not interested in studying the law or things that, traditional, become a doctor, a lawyer, whatever you're going to be. I've always been interested in human behavior and business and marketing and how that relates to it, and problem solving. Most of my younger life, I was working retail, and it didn't matter the environment I was in. I mean, I didn't work at that many stores. I kind of kept a pretty narrow path, and I worked at Gap for a very long time, and specifically in Gap Kids when I was much younger, which people who know me will find interesting because I'm not a kid person, but I loved helping the moms. Actually, talking about ease, I did love helping them make life a bit easier, at the time. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to the work that it takes to be an entrepreneur today, it's not easy. And I think, unfortunately, the internet has sold people on the idea that everyone is an entrepreneur. And I don't believe that that's true. I think that everyone can have entrepreneurial tendencies. I think everyone can create a side hustle if they want to, but I don't think innately everyone's an entrepreneur, because I've seen it over and over again. And people want to ask me how to do things, how to start a business, how to do anything, right? To make a business plan and do the thing. And I'm like, how am I supposed to verbalize to you things that I have never read in a book? I literally just do them. And I think that's what makes an entrepreneur. I don't think an entrepreneur is asking people for a roadmap. I think that's the last thing we want is a roadmap. We might stop along the way and be like, I think I'm off my path. I want to get back over there. What do you think about this? Some trusted, the hero's journey, some like trusted guides along the way. But I just don't think an entrepreneur ever wants someone else's map. I think we are innately trying to cast a vision and draw our own map. That's what we're trying to do. So, when it comes to the hard work, I can't even explain where it comes from. It's, sure, making money is great, but it's not about that. It's just like, I have this idea of a thing I can do. I think I can make it cool and great and people will love it. And so I want to make it and do that thing. That's really all it is. Like, why do I have a line of spices? I don't know. I thought it would be fun. There's just nothing. There's no other reason. It's not like, oh, I thought it would make me millions and I could sell it. No, I just thought it would be fun. And I wanted to design this thing and have these great quality spices that people could use. And yeah, it's going to make their life easier. And I'm a little bit of a control freak. So instead of you making it yourself, can you just buy mine? Because it's definitely going to taste better. So yeah, I do think that's important for people to know that. It's because I'm not really into the anti-hustle movement. I'm cool with people recognizing that you need to honor your energy and take breaks and recharge, because I definitely do that. But I think when people talk about not hustling, I think it's selling a lie, because all of those people, anybody I see who says that, I'm like, I saw your hustle. I saw it. I saw it break you. I saw it build you back up. I saw it make you successful. And now you're telling people that that's what they should not do. I feel like that is so obnoxious and it's a lie, So anyway, what were we saying?
I appreciate the truth telling. But I think, again, this kind of comes back to your capacity for uncertainty, because I work a lot with clients. Uncertainty, whether it's anything, is really trips up my clients, because to your point earlier, it's unresolved trauma. It's these unresolved.
They're living a lie if they're saying uncertainty is the problem, because nothing is certain.
Right.
I was just having this joke with my husband literally an hour ago: death, taxes, and my cat throwing up because he's hungry. He goes, add that to the list: death, taxes, and Mason just puking on the side. If you don't have a cat, you're like, what are you talking about? But if you have a cat, you're like, yes, they puke way too often. I think that is something that I think it's just from childhood. There's something going on where people who are afraid of uncertainty, I don't understand what you do believe is certain. Let's first hash that out, right? What do they think is certain? They think their paycheck is certain? It's certainly not. That company, something could happen to that company, and that's not a certainty. Even, I think your skill set is a pretty high level of certainty. That's what I rely on, is certainty. What am I capable of? What do I know about? What can I do? How can I earn a living and make this thing go? But at the same time, who knows? I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. So
yeah, this gets
it's just such a lie to live as if, I'm not sure. Well, no, none of us are sure. What are you sure about? Are you sure about what you're willing to do? Are you sure about how responsible you're willing to be for yourself and your decisions? That's what people need to be certain of. I'm certain that if something gets pulled out from under me, we'll just say financially or health-wise, that I will adapt. So that's that's kind of coming back to your idea of this consistency and being able to adapt. I'm certain that I will be resilient. And I don't know that other people feel comfortable with that, but that's where people do need to get to. We need to be resilient, whatever that's going to mean for each of us.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I think it's in doing the risks that you develop that versus knowing. I think though, one of the things is, for a lot of people, uncertainty was very unsafe, whether through going through an illness as a child or through an unstable household or neglect. And so I think that's where that comes in. And sometimes people become so high functioning in other areas, then they take all of that high functioning out on food. But to your point, it's the self-trust. We're always talking about self-trust on this podcast, is develop, but self-trust comes from challenging yourself. It doesn't come from mantras and telling yourself to trust.
Or opting out.
Right. Oh, I like that. Yes.
What you're describing with people who are afraid of uncertainty, so they'll just take this route. You're still making a choice. Just because you choose a thing that you're 80 to 90% sure of the outcome versus 50 to 60, you're still making a choice, and still nothing is guaranteed.
I agree 100%. And I think, though, all of us, even entrepreneurs, lie to ourselves about how unpredictable, because I mean, you can't go through your day-to-day existence realizing nothing is really in your control, because I would say as an entrepreneur, we actually think we have a lot more control than we do.
Yeah, that's very possible.
Yeah.
But I think on that note, it's not necessarily about that we have control. It's that we trust that we will respond appropriately when things don't go as we expected.
Yeah. Yeah. We always say it's not about control, it's choice, right? It's like choosing to show up again. It's choosing to learn the hard lessons. Like, I love when I heard that you were launching the Balance Bites spices and meals, I love how you were like, people think I'm set because I have this big following. And when you announced that, I was like, oh my God, that's such a completely different business model than publishing. And I was like, oh my God, she really does love like being creative and a challenge, because it's not, even though it's in the same space on the back end of the business, it's something, and I know you've done it before, but it's still a completely different scale, shipping, all that kind of stuff. And I think the payoff is when you do learn to be with uncertainty, you get the same thing. Often my clients will realize is that in some spaces, uncertainty is where their strengths are. It's why they're effective leaders. It's why they're amazing artists. It's why they're great leaders, like all of this stuff, but it's in these certain other areas that it feels unsafe. And I was like, that's what's so, I think, paradoxical, is the more you expand your capacity for uncertainty, you realize you are dealing with it a lot of times, and it can be your greatest strength, which I think you're showing us that in terms of, like, why did I make a spice line? Because I wanted to. I love that, right? Like, not because it necessarily fits or I should, but it's because it's coming from your intuition. One of the things you have said is that the bravest thing you can do is be honest with yourself. And I love that. You were just, giving us a little bit of honesty there. And often self-awareness is painful. And so, especially when seeing our blind spots. And I was wondering, what were some of those moments for you that felt hard in the moment, but ended up paying off?
I mean, I think this happens pretty frequently, that in the moment, I mean, this is like maybe like micro level, but I think hard conversations in the moment are there. I am not someone who shies away from confrontation, because ultimately I do think that avoiding confrontation builds resentment, and it's toxic for relationships, whether they're, personal, professional, romantic, etc. So ultimately, I think I have learned over the years that when there is a hard conversation that needs to be had, to process, make sure I know what I want to say, and sometimes consult someone I trust who knows me pretty well and can help steer me a little bit if I'm being more reactive than I want to be, but that I respond accordingly and have the hard conversation. So there was a podcast, I think it was a short-lived, just like a series. And then there's also a book, and it's called Radical Candor. And I really love this concept where you need for people to trust you and have this understanding that, like, they know that you care about them. And so now I can have this challenging conversation. So that's something that I've really learned over the years. And I think part of it has to do with being an entrepreneur and having people working with me on my team. And part of it is my personality as well. And just that self-awareness that, I know that I have a certain personality type that's pretty domineering and commanding. But at the same time, I need to make sure that the people that work on my team know that I really care about them first and foremost. And once we have established that foundation, then I can deliver the challenging words or the conversation that we need to have. And I was not as good at that early in my career, early in my entrepreneurship. And when I had, some people working with me in the beginning, and I think it's gotten to a much better place now where we'll just nip things in the bud, where I'm like, listen, I don't think there's anyone on my team right now who hasn't been working with me for at least like 2, if not 3 years.
That's amazing.
With me a long time. I'm like, I'm doing something right, even whatever. I mean, it's just an interesting thing, but I don't do everything right. That's for sure. But that is one thing that I feel like I'm getting better at, and it's a muscle I have to flex. And it's something that I have to, as the boss, be willing to do. And it's uncomfortable for a lot of people, but I've definitely learned that over the years, and it's been a challenge, but also a major reward when you figure out how to handle it, and that you have to do it. Does that make sense? Does that kind of fit?
100%. And I love that you said that because I think those hard conversations are so many things. The other stress pattern is avoid that I didn't get. Competitor, avoid, and accommodate, which is based on the Thomas Kilmann conflict model. And yeah, it's those little things. Like a lot of my clients start to realize like they're eating or drinking at night because it's like, we call it the death by 1,000 paper cuts. What you're talking about is those conversations that you want to have, but you don't. And it's like, I don't want them to think that I don't like them. And I love that idea of making sure everyone feels, okay, we're on the same team here, right?
Right.
It's about getting better. And actually in adult development, it's called optimal conflict. And when you get out of compete, avoid, and accommodate, there's a quadrant called optimal conflict. And it's when you actually get you go through the creative, uncertain process of, okay, what's everyone's needs? What are we really trying to do here? Whatever it is, and you get so much of a better product or an outcome when you can actually use conflict constructively. We are definitely conditioned to be afraid of it, but I love that because then that helps you, again, continue to show up in a way that it's enjoyable. So when it gets hard, you have the support with your
totally.
team.
And I think one thing that people misunderstand about me is like my risk tolerance is actually not that high. I'm not a big risk taker. Like I pretty much bet on myself and bet on things that I think I can do mostly pretty well. So while it seems like some of the things I'll leap into or I start, seem risky, I mean, I'm not taking investments from people. I'm not playing with other people's, money and doing all of that. I'm pretty risk averse. So I try and keep the waters calm. And to me, confronting an issue sooner than later is what will help keep the waters calm, if that makes sense. And so I actually just went and I was like Googling the radical candor framework because I think you would love this. And the actual wording so Kim Scott is the author. And I don't remember which company, if she was working with Google or who it was. People need to know that you care personally and then you can challenge them directly. And so when you're in a space where you care personally and you're challenging people directly, that's radical candor, where the opposite of that would be manipulative insincerity. So it's really interesting, right? Like people don't know that you care, yet you're challenging them directly. And so it goes on. There's 4 little quadrants to this thing, but I think it is really interesting. And I found that to be a very, very helpful framework as well. Several years ago when I first heard about it, I was like, okay, this is where I need to be in terms of if I want to do this challenging part, I need to make sure that the people with me first understand that I really care.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. One of the things you were saying is you have a low tolerance for risk, which I do too as well. People are like, you're such a risk taker. I'm like, no, I'm very methodical about what I'm doing. Because when you've, I don't know about you, but I've had enough like flops that I've learned from that I keep getting wiser and smarter and know what questions to ask for. One of the things I want to ask you about evolving is sometimes we need to end things. And I don't know if it's officially ended, but you are ending your Balance Bite podcast.
As of this week. I don't know exactly when this episode will air, but episode 400 is airing.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, some people are like, and I think there's a difference between quitting and ending. And I think I'm just so curious, like that takes a lot of trust because it's a hugely popular podcast. It's one of the most popular podcasts. It's a great show.
Don't make me doubt my decision.
No. Well, no, I mean, I think as you explained on the episode.
I don't doubt it, but yeah.
But this is what this is why I wanted you to have you on the show is you and your co-host are having like your interests are evolving and whatnot. And I think part of what America doesn't do well, not only is it it's like death, right? We don't talk about it. That's when we spend the most money with healthcare. We're just not good with endings. And I know I'm not myself. Like I don't even like to say goodbye at parties. I'm like, all right, I'm out of here. Bye. I'll see you again. But how do you know when it's time to either move on from a disappointment or a failure or really end something that is really good and you could keep doing?
Well, I think this boils down to authenticity at the core of it. So if I don't, and I talked a little bit earlier about energy, all of this sounds a little woo, but this is the reality
for this podcast.
Okay, good.
You're in good company.
I'm on the low range of the woo scale.
Well, I don't know. I like to bring in the research to back up.
Okay.
Okay. We're kind of meeting in the middle.
Well, I think Brene Brown probably is
we're
the researcher on this topic, but I posted something in my Diane Direct on my Instagram account, right? And somebody actually commented and then she deleted it because I was like, I wasn't stealing this quote, but I watch and listen to a lot of Brene, and she could have said this and in those words or not. So someone tell me if it's a quote that she said exactly verbatim. But I wrote, when you show up authentically, you give others permission to do the same. And I wrote that from my gut. And again, I don't know if she's said it in those words, but it's something that people have written to me over and over, that like, because I am not afraid to live my life and do things and make decisions and speak out on social justice issues that are important to me, because of that, someone else was also brave and was empowered and motivated and inspired to be more of themselves. And I think that, I'm not going to do something just because it's popular if I don't feel authentically that I'm bringing the energy I need to bring to it. That's it, like point blank. So, for a little while, Liz and I have said, my podcast co-host, we had said, let's evolve the show a bit. And we tried changing things up a bit, even in maybe the last year or so. So the last like 50 or so episodes, I don't remember when, but, we changed up the format a little bit and tried to make the show a little bit shorter sometimes, or evolve, like you were talking about, really evolving with what podcasts have become. Our show's been on the air for almost 8 years. Like this is back when people were like, what's a podcast?
Is that the radio? No, I'm just kidding.
I know. I mean, NPR had shows, and there were like 2 other paleo podcasts at the time. And our show was definitely more paleo focused in the beginning, but I have to be excited about it. I don't have to be excited about it every week. Let me put it that way. So here's the difference. And I think this is what matters too, is that stuff that you love to do, you're not going to love it every single day. There's going to be days that you have to show up, right? I mean, people will say they have a kid and they are so glad they have a kid and they love being a mom, but there are days where you're like, I really wish I wasn't, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that with anything. And so just because there were times when we were both a little like burnt out on whatever the topics were that we were talking about, or just having to show up for it, or whatever the case was, I think the trend line became our hearts weren't 100% in it. And it was consistently in that place. And that didn't mean we weren't 100% to show up for each other. We're really good friends. We became friends because of the show. It's like the core of our friendship. And I told her, I was like, what's going to happen to our friendship? How are we going to talk every week? I'm like, don't ignore my texts, but I can't be afraid of letting go of something successful just because it's successful. I don't know. It just doesn't sit well with me. It's not how I operate. I'm not going to do something just because other people want me to or expect me to. We talked about that. So, and what happened the day that we were like, maybe we should end it at 400, and we had that conversation many, many weeks ago, I literally saw that day my really good friend, Cassie Joy Garcia, who had a show called Fed and Fit, a podcast. She posted to Instagram that she was going to be ending her podcast. I didn't know she was ending her podcast, but the day Liz and I had that conversation, I saw her post, and we got off of our recording, and I texted Cassie. I was like, hey, do you want to start a new podcast? Here's what I want to talk about. And she's like, I totally do. And I'm like, great. Like it just, wow. So you never know what's going to happen until you make one decision, and then one door closes and another door opens. And it's so cheesy, but that's the truth. Like you have to make space in your life for new things, whether it's time, energy, focus, etc. So if you're holding on to this old thing and you're not 100% like, yes, I should be doing this, like you don't really believe that. Again, even if there are days where you're not 100%, just the difference. Like I never want to write the books. Whatever book I'm writing, I'm like, I hate the process of writing the book, but I 100% want the book to be done. And I write my books. Somebody else doesn't write them for me. I actually have to sit and get the words out. Yes, I have an editor who will read it and then tweak the words to make them sound better and be like, yes, this is what you meant to say, Diane. I'm like, it is what I meant to say. Thank you. But I don't want to do that work. I don't want to have to show up for it every day, but I 100% want it done. You know what I mean? So there's a difference there. If you're like, actually, I'm not 100% that I need this show to still exist, then I don't know. I just don't know what any other way to be. It feels inauthentic and unfair to the people who are spending their time, which is their money, and their attention is their money. That's our currency. it's not fair, to be inauthentic and showing up and not having your heart in it 100%. So
yeah,
that's not, yeah. I mean, we're just like, okay, 400 sounds like a good number. Great.
But I love again, in Truth with Food, we often talk about not closing the story loop, which is often what we do to just like make judgment and conclusions, which then leave us out of choices. But I love that what you did was like, okay, I'm starting to, again, you noticed your energy, which is an important, sounds like metric for you of like, I'm not sure that I want to like this is starting this format, something needs to change. And you guys then experimented rather than just being like, nope, we're done. It was like, let me hang with the uncertainty of what this is going to become and what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And we'll get more data. And again, I think that speaks to the low risk. It looks high risk, but you've gotten the data and what's authentic for you. And I think that's important, which brings me, I think, to our last question is, I'm so curious then, how do you measure? What do you measure to be consistent? Because on one hand, you're like, I don't like the book, but I want it done. And then you're like, I'm not going to do something just because it's successful. So I would love to know for you what matters. Because a lot of people, when I said we were doing consistency as a topic, a lot of people in the membership community were like, all right, how do we measure consistency if it's not these traditional metrics? So
I think you measure consistency in the impact. So whether that's for yourself, like, am I a healthier person now than I was 10 years ago? You know what I mean? Like, it's not an everyday thing. It's a grand scheme of things approach. So for me, the success of a book, it's great to get a nice paycheck, but the impact that I have on people's lives is for sure a metric for me. Because also, whatever you're going to do in the future, if it's not having the positive impact that you're trying to have, you just don't feed into anything else. I think it's a dead end. So that's really, if I think about what the success metric is, it's definitely impact. Am I making people's lives better, happier? Am I helping them help themselves? Am I happier, now than I was? I mean, I think there's more stress in my life now and I have more responsibility and more people I'm responsible for. But ultimately, do I wake up with like a vigor for the things that I want to do? Am I excited about building things? And yeah, I'm stressed along the way some weeks that things aren't going exactly as I had hoped or thought they could, but that just means I dig in and do the work. So yeah, I don't know.
It sounds like you're really clear on your values, like impact.
Yeah. And I feel like we definitely live a fortunate life. We live in San Francisco and it's not something that everyone has the chance to live, in a place that they would say is like, oh, the dream place I would want to live. And that's something that I don't take for granted. And I do feel like I work hard to be where I am. But I think part of it is, I don't know how to verbalize this, but it's like, I really take pleasure in simple things. We'll definitely get this from my mom. I mean, my mom is the ultimate Pollyanna. So if you're unfamiliar with Pollyanna, it's like, we use it as an expression. I don't think it's a Disney character from movies long ago, or probably was a book first. It's just looking at the world in a sunny way and with gratitude. And like my mom will be like, yeah, we saw the sunset tonight. And, she just is not really complaining about things because we've seen so much that people go through. And I think if folks are measuring success in money and things, then I don't know when you're ever going to feel like that's done. Mm-hmm. So if you can measure success in your ability to wake up and be happy and grateful to just open your eyes and take a breath and be able to, for me, have the freedom to do the things I want to do and live the life I want to live for the most part. I mean, private jet would be nice, let's face it. But aside from that, I have everything I want and need. I don't, need anything. So I don't think there's anything beyond that I need to measure.
Yeah, I think this is comes back to when you have so much meaning in your life, you don't need it so much in the hedonistic pleasures, right? Because what I'm hearing is you've really used your capacity for uncertainty. You've increased it over the years. You followed your curiosity, increased your capacity for uncertainty, and have been able to really get clear on what your values are versus maybe what traditional values are in our society, which, tends to be money and more and more and more. And you've carved out this own path. And so it's this beautiful feedback loop of like, you're in so much choice every day, so that even when things get challenging, it's like you can appreciate, wow, but I live where I want to live, right? And I have these,
and I've chosen all of it. Like I'm not resentful about the challenges because I've chosen it. And I think too, that doesn't mean I don't want to build bigger businesses, but part of my mom reminds me that my grandpa, like this was something that he always said, and he passed away many years ago now, but that when I grow a business bigger, it doesn't always necessarily mean just more money in the bank. It means I give another person a job that they love. And then we like watch them grow into a different person doing this job. I mean, I have some women on my team, again, who've been with me for so long, and the people they have become in that much time is like a huge transformation. And that is so rewarding to watch one person who was like so shy in the beginning and like didn't know who she was. And now she's like the first one to talk on our calls every time, and just like a different person. I mean, I think that's the thing that people don't really understand about entrepreneurship and small business and growing a small business, is that when it does become more than you're creating this culture and you're creating a company in a way, regardless of how closely people are working with you, but they're all touched by that energy, And so I think that that's another part of what it is to kind of build something bigger where, we hire more people or contract more people or whoever it is that's going to come in and loop into the work. But it's not always about just building bigger to squirrel away a bigger nest egg. Security is a good thing, but I just don't think that like excess is the most important.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, I think though your values are like that. I can see that consistent value because you're always like, well, I want to help people and I want to make an impact, and you're doing that with your team. So I see that as like, you're being consistent with your values and how you define them, right? Because that's, I think, another thing about, everyone talks about values a lot, but and I use an adult development framework, but the more you step into what's called the self-authoring is like, which is you're talking about being very in choice, the more you define these values on your own terms versus maybe, like take the example, loyalty as a value. Some people may think that's loyalty to their family, but as they become more self-authoring, it's more loyal to what's healthy, with healthy boundaries if their family isn't so healthy. And so you're really defining like what you want to get out of entrepreneurship and your life on your own terms. And I think that is the key to consistency, is like, do I really want to be doing this? Yeah. And I chose this. So thank you so much for being here, Diane. Is there anything I didn't ask that you think is important to share when it comes to evolving and what we talked about?
I think we hit everything because I took some notes along the way, and I think we ended up discussing most of them. And as you mentioned, ending the Balance Bites podcasting, me able to pick up a new one. Driven is the new podcast, and that'll be starting soon. We were trying to jump into it quickly so that it would start when Balance Bites was ending. But my co-host is currently on a book tour for her new book. And, we recorded an episode and then we both agreed it wasn't our best work. And so we were like, you know what? Let's just take a minute. Let's just breathe and put our best into it to have it come out just a little bit later. So I'm excited about that. And I think if folks are interested in the types of conversation that we have had today, I think they'll really like what we're going to be talking about in Driven, because it is focused on entrepreneurship, but also kind of that healthy balance and self-awareness, and how do we improve what we're doing, and also kind of practical, tactical stuff. So it's going to be a fun time.
Wonderful. And we will have all the places people can contact you in the show notes, but where can people find you online?
Yeah, I think probably the best place is just through my Instagram initially at Diane SanFilippo, just at my name. And I have emails that I send out once a week. So if you're interested in the type of content we were talking about today, that's just my main email list. You can get through my Instagram. And I like that because, especially if you're an entrepreneur or someone who's a health coach or interested in this stuff, I think social media and FOMO and feeling like, what did I miss? What did she post? We really take the best of the best and make sure it's in the emails so that you're getting that content without having to stress about social media. And yeah, Balance Bites, the meals and the spices. If you're somebody who wants to make life a little bit easier by having some good food ready quickly, it's just in your freezer on hand, real food with real ingredients cooked by real people. definitely come check it out. And our spice blends too. Well, that's at Balance Bites.
Because I often tell clients, they're like, well, I'm bored with I realize they fall off with consistency, not because they don't want to eat healthy, but because they're bored. And I'm like, find good spice mixes, because of a sudden chicken is like,
tastes so good.
Or something. Yeah. So I'm going to be buying some for myself but I never know the right spice combinations. I'm not a chef.
I do. I got you.
All right, good. Then I'm heading over right now when we're done with this. So,
okay.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Diane.
Thank you.
Thank you, Health Rebels, for tuning in today. Have a reaction, question, or want the transcript from today's episode? Find me at alishapiro.com. I'd love if you leave a review on Apple Podcast and tell your friends and family about Insatiable. It helps us grow our community and share a new way of approaching health in our bodies. Thanks for engaging in a different kind of conversation. And remember, always, your body truths are unique, profound, real, and liberating.